My mute button, no, there it goes. Stopped muting. It was just a button. Waiting for the Hangout to catch up with us. Using our own microphone button. No, there it goes. This is one of the
checks. Ah. There's only just over a day left for the Humble Bundle. Oh, well. I don't guess we'll mention it then.
Yeah, because
it'll be gone before...
by the time the show comes out.
Yeah. So Dell has a thing. I didn't get a chance. Well, we don't worry about that one. German organ made from 49 floppy disk drives. $4 million adult Friend Finder users leaked for all to see. 90s hack. Mozilla giving up the smart... Man, there's a lot of other news in here. Oh, well. We got a lot.
Yeah, so there's plenty of news there, more than we can cover.
Yeah. So let me close those tabs. And I have found that I'm going to close all the way out of Firefox. Maybe. I don't know why, but Firefox just memory leaks like a sun on my machine.
I don't really have that problem. I don't know why I'm talking high all of a sudden.
Yeah. I don't really think that the download helper plugin is part of it. I mean, it might be though, because I put it on everything, on every machine I go to. But if I have good internet at home, I might can get away from that, because the main reason I use it is like if I find a video and I don't want to sit there and buffer,
right.
I'll start it to downloading, and then after it's finished, then I'll watch it. So I might have to retrain my habits. All right, are we ready to start recording?
I'm ready when you is.
All righty. So I'm recording now.
All right. So let's do the show, shall we?
Sounds like a plan, Stan.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyday Linux, episode 194, the return of the news, recorded May 24th, 2015, and brought to you by Element OP Productions, elementop.com. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Linux show that's not about Linux, but about life in the context of Linux. I am your host, Mark, the Sultan of the Soapbox, and joining me this week, again, is the great GUI kid, Seth Anderson. How are you, Seth?
Doing great, Mark. And I would just like to welcome everybody to the awesome Element OP network of one podcast.
Yes, it was a network at one time, and I hope it will be again.
Me too.
Yeah. I actually had somebody in an email or a voicemail, somebody refer to themselves as an Element OP faithful, and I thought that's Seth's doing right there.
Well, cool.
That's in your intro. So Chris is not with us this week because of reasons. So we hope he's having fun, or don't even know really. So we hope stuff for reasons. But I do want to say that this is Memorial Day weekend here in the U.S. It's tomorrow as of the recording, a couple of days ago when it comes out. I just didn't want to let that moment pass. This is the day in America where we take time to remember the dead who have fallen in battle or in the course of defending our country. And so it's not a time for celebrating veterans, that comes later. It is a time for remembering the fallen and the sacrifice made by those who were left behind. It's as much a day for the fallen soldiers as it is for their wife and their children and their husbands and their daughters. So that's all I have to say for that. It always kind of bothers me a little bit when people say Happy Memorial Day. It's really not supposed to be a happy day. But on the same token, I've said before, and I think it's appropriate. I think it's entirely appropriate that we celebrate their sacrifice by enjoying the things that their sacrifice affords us. So for barbecuing and beach going and mattress buying and all that, I don't think any of that is in poor taste, because we're enjoying the things that they sacrificed so that we could enjoy. What are your thoughts on that, Seth?
No, I totally agree. Today is the day where you think the people who carry on with the holes in their lives because of their loved ones paid the ultimate price. And as we get further removed from major armed conflicts, granted, there's been like Iraq and stuff like that, but World War II was a national thing where if you didn't know somebody who went to war, then you probably didn't know anybody, because there was so much of, and the same to a lesser degree Korea, but like Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and the Operation Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, and things like that, the Army has been specialized and a lot smaller, and it's almost become a subculture of Americans who are in the military and the military complex, versus it was a national thing for previous generations. So I think those who they didn't pay the sacrifice, but there's a hole in their life because someone who did.
Right.
So, and that is different from Veterans Day, where we think people who did pay the sacrifice so that we could enjoy our lives.
Right. Hey, in church this morning, the pastor, in recognizing the day, asked for anybody to stand who has suffered firsthand a loss as a result of war. And in our service, the second service tends to be the younger group of people. There wasn't anybody, and I think that is an increasingly common story. But you go back a couple of decades, and you couldn't say that. You go back to the 1950s, and everybody would have to stand up, like you said, because the entire nation was involved in a war effort, in World War I and II, and then a smaller subset in Vietnam, and then a smaller subset in Korea, and then the subset keeps getting smaller. And I was actually talking about that with a veteran friend of mine today. It's the same thing. Not only are we specializing war, but we're mechanizing war so that we lose fewer people, and that's good. And we kill fewer people. That's good too. So anyway, I like the way you put that. It's a day to honor those with holes in their lives, and thankfully, that is getting smaller. We want that. We want there to be fewer broken people. We want there to be fewer broken families. We want there to be fewer wars. But it is appropriate to take this weekend, to remember them. So, for those of you out there that are living with a loss, so that I don't have to live with a loss, I thank you. And on a lighter note, because it is a holiday weekend, my children conned me into letting them have a sleepover. So I have far too many girls in my home, and it's an amazing thing. I've discovered that my children never do anything wrong. They made girls, right? Just because girls. People with boys don't have this problem. But when you got a bunch of girls, they decided to make a facial mask out of household equipment. I don't even know what it was, but it was like, cocoa butter and sugar and whatever. And so it was brown. I'm guessing there was some chocolate in there somewhere. And they had covered their hands and faces with it, and it was cute, and it was a fun thing that they did. And then I went downstairs to use the bathroom, and they had apparently covered the bathroom in it as well, because the bathroom needed a facial. It was all over the walls, all over the sink, all over the toilet. It was everywhere. But amazingly, nobody did it. It just happened. When I called them on it, not one of them had anything to do. In fact, they had never even seen it. My two oldest children weren't even aware that we had a bathroom in the first floor of the house. It was amazing. It was completely ignorant of the fact that they weren't even sure we lived here. They thought maybe they were just visiting for the weekend. So it's pretty phenomenal how I have such perfect children. And I just wanted to give thanks for that because they never do anything wrong.
That is awesome. And you are fortunate and blessed.
So I yelled at my wife for making such a mess of the bathroom and made her clean it up because clearly she's the only one who could possibly have done it.
Right. Because kids are incapable of lying. We all know that. They're angels, on loan from heaven until they hit puberty, and then they become loners from hell. I don't know.
It's an exchange program.
Right.
So you are spending your time doing what you enjoy doing, reading, right?
Yes. While I was gone to Hawaii, we had a near lightning strike at the house. And so the upstairs, the TV in my bedroom is currently at Best Buy, and the TV downstairs, I talked before about Changong, and I don't think I'll ever buy another TV from them because they never responded to my attempts for warranty while I was under the 90-day window. But luckily, I purchased the extended thing. And so now every time I call them, it's like a different number I got to get off the stupid thing. And since, I've been doing it at work where I can pull up the stuff online and have it all there. So, but anyway, I'm going to get that taken care of. So I've been, instead of like going back to a small TV, who wants to watch a 21-inch TV when you had a 40? I've just been rereading my Honor Harrington series, and I'm up to like, I don't know, book 12 or something like that. So hopefully I'll have it finished a couple of weeks. There's only like 20 books in the series. But yes, I've been, and like last night, I was proud of myself. At 4:00 in the morning, I stopped reading so I could get a couple hours of sleep before church.
That shows real self-restraint. So.
It does. I'm getting older and a bit wiser.
So do you find when you reread a book that it's as enjoyable as the first time around?
It depends on the book. These books are so like the first ones, whenever the group of people involved, the cast of characters was smaller, I enjoyed those. But now that I'm, I don't have a photographic memory, but I have an above average memory. And so I'm remembering these large chunks of things. And so I'm kind of skipping those, and I'm seeing more and more of the, it's like quit page filling, and so the recaps in these books are like the 5th or 6th or 20th time I've seen them, the little paragraphs on that. So I don't enjoy the exposition as much, but whenever I enjoy a lot of the character interactions, sometimes I enjoy it more because I see, whenever you're 20 books, there's people who only showed up momentarily in the earlier books that become very important later on. And because they were so fleeting in their first mention, you overlooked them. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, this person is so-and-so. I didn't realize they were in here. So his books are a mix. Some of them I really enjoy. The early ones I really enjoyed. Some of the later ones, it just gets too cumbersome. There's too many people to follow and it be as enjoyable. But when I am rereading them, I am seeing why you didn't like them at all. And so, but there was this one book, this Star Trek book called How Much for Just the Planet, that I might look for and buy again because I read it a couple of times and it was hilarious every time I read it. So it depends on the book. Has a short answer.
See, I find that
give a short answer.
Like with music, I can listen to a song 1,000 times and enjoy it every time. A movie, I can watch a movie many, many times and look for different things. This time I'm going to focus on visual elements. This time I'm going to focus on music cues. And there's enough of that. And then, once you know the movie so well, it's like sitting around with an old friend. You're reminiscing as you watch the movie. I don't find that to be true with books for me. Probably because my visual recall is so good as well. I'm remembering the paragraph that follows as I'm reading the current paragraph. And I don't have that nuance ability. I guess in the picture in my mind, I don't have the ability to look for different themes or find different elements. And so I almost, other than like the Bible, I can think of maybe 2 books that I've reread and enjoyed them. The Douglas Adams series I've read twice and loved it both times equally as much. The Lord of the Rings, I think I started reading it a second time and gave up on it. And otherwise, it just the list of books I've read twice is very small because it doesn't appeal to me. And I wonder what, is that, am I deficient in some area? Because I can do that with music and movies, some things that move, I can do that. But with books, I can't.
I mean, to a much lesser, like whenever you watch a movie once and then you go back and watch it again, you've kind of already seen the big picture. And so you're not trying to take everything in. Instead, little things that you only you didn't realize you pick up the second time. And so to a lesser extent, to me, that's true in books. I am seeing just I know what he's doing here. And in one sense, I don't like that, but in another sense, I'm able to pick up more of the just stuff that for whatever reason, I either didn't really grasp or didn't appreciate the first time. So it kind of depends. And I have a confession to make, Mark. I hope we can still be friends, but I did not like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy trilogy.
That's okay. You're allowed not to like it. There's no accounting for taste, and if you want to be tasteless, I'm fine with that.
Okay, just I'm glad we can still be friends because I mean, had I read it in college when all of y'all did the first time, I probably would have loved it then, but it was too all over the place for me to enjoy. I care for the linear stuff more. So
yeah, I mean, I do think less of you, but we can still be friends.
Okay, good.
It is definitely something you either get or you don't.
Right.
Like certain movies are like that. Monty Python and the Holy Grail, any Monty Python movie, in fact,
right,
gets better upon subsequent viewings. I most of them I didn't like the first time, so maybe if you go back and read it again, you'll find you enjoy it again. I don't know. I'm blanking on the Napoleon Dynamite. I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but I'm gonna tell it again. My friend Russ loaned me the DVD to Napoleon Dynamite because he loved the movie. And I can see the visual perfectly clearly. He's holding it out to me just outside of my reach. And he says, "But you must promise me to watch it twice." And I said, "Yeah, okay, whatever." And I started, and I pulled it back. I said, "No, promise me you will watch it twice." Okay, I promise I will watch it twice. I take the DVD from him. It sits around for a couple of weeks at my house before I get some time to watch it. I put it in. Halfway through it, I'm done. I don't even watch it. It's terrible. I don't want to finish it, but I said, I promised him. So I finished it the first time. And I literally threw the disc across the room. It was such a terrible experience, but again, he made me promise and he knows that I don't break a promise. So about a week later, I watched it the second time and it became one of my favorite movies because once you had all the set pieces in place, there was so much going on. You had to get them there first. And all you could see was the absurdity the first time. The second time I started to see the brilliance. And now it's one I've seen many times. I own because there's brilliance beyond the absurdity. And maybe the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the same way for you.
Yeah, because I didn't finish Napoleon Dynamite the one time I tried to watch it. And I've not gone back to try again.
So again, nobody made you promise.
Right. So yeah, and I'm sure, there are some movies that are just better in company. Like I can watch The Princess Bride by myself over and over and over and laugh, and love it. But it's so much better when you're watching it with someone who appreciates it. Someone who's never seen it before, you can't watch it with them. You just have to say, you watch it and then come back and we can watch it together.
Because you'll ruin it for them if you try to watch it with them.
Right. So, and I'm sure maybe that would be a thing like that. But yeah, I never finished Napoleon Dynamite.
Well, give it another try and tell me what you think. But for now, we're going to move on to listener feedback. Brandon writes in to say that we helped him get a job. Yay. Says, "Hi, guys. I listened to the interviews with Mark and Seth and can't leave out Chris. I thought the interviews to be very entertaining. You always hear about big celebrities' lives, but those come a dime a dozen. You never hear about stories of real working people. We need more storytellers like yourselves that make great content and is never boring. I, like Seth, got my job from mentioning Linux. I guess I should say thank you, Everyday Linux, as if it weren't for you guys mentioning the Fog project, I would not have the job I have today as a computer administrator. Back when you started, when Mark was still living in Texas and worked in education, you used to rave about the Fog project. So I looked it up at fog.org and had a small lab at home and played around with it some at that time. And I had an interview with a company that needed an administrator. During the interview process, they asked about Norton Ghost and Acronis imaging. But I asked if they'd ever used any open source products like Fog. The interview said that they never had heard of it, and they wrote it down and said they'd look into it as another solution. Long story short, by the time I reached the end of the parking lot of the company, I got a phone call that said I was hired. They said that they'd never given Linux a thought, and that they would bring lots of, and that they thought I would bring a lot of new ideas to the table. So I owe Linux and Everyday Linux the podcast. I owe Linux and the Everyday Linux podcast. Thanks, your faithful listener, Brandon R. from Houston, Texas. So congratulations, Brandon. That's a cool story.
Right. And since you already admitted that you owed us, we will be sending you a invoice later. So
Yes. Did I mention the 15% rake we take when somebody gets a job based on ours? It's a placement fee. We'll take 15% of your salary in perpetuity.
that works for me.
Yeah. Seth, the school that you went to had a deal like that, right? If they give you a job, they take a certain percentage.
Yes, the one I went to in California, that you went there, and your tuition was a percentage of your first year salary. I ended up settling with them because I thought I would be able to do better than what I settled for, but I wasn't able to do what I settled for, and so it ended up being a financial hardship for me for a couple of years. But it was a again, for somebody who didn't have the money to pay for it up front and didn't have the available credit to finance it like that, that was the only way I could afford to go.
So there is precedent for us charging Brandon. Brandon, check your mail for the bill.
Right.
Dennis writes in with a book suggestion. It says, "Hey guys, I love the show and I'm a Patreon supporter." Thank you for that, Dennis. I may have already mentioned this book, but it's a great listen on Audible. The book is Future Crimes by Mark Goodman, and you should add it to your list of books to read. I look forward to heavy traffic during my commute when listening to your podcast each day. Keep up the great work. That makes you kind of a sick man if you're looking forward to heavy traffic. But I'll definitely, Future Crimes sounds like maybe it's in line with the Minority Report. I'll have to check it out. Seth, you ever heard of it?
I have never heard of it.
He's looking it up now.
I'm trying to pull up Google.
I could see he was looking over at his other computer typing. While you're doing that, Stan says he's living a double life with Seth. Gentlemen, just a quick note to say I really enjoyed the Sethapalooza episode. I'm a few years older than Seth, but I see quite a few commonalities. I, too, spent more than a few hours in my youth rolling a 20-sided die, helped safeguard my elderly parents from Nigerian princes, lived in a sparsely populated area requiring more than an hour to travel to my job, and was mostly a loner during my bachelor days. Except for me not being a genius, we're practically the same person. Now let's have a Mark episode. What do you want people to walk away with if they only listen to the final 2 minutes of the show? If you want suggestions for distro review, how about Antergos? My daily driver is OpenSUSE with KDE. Apologies to the GNOME fans, but I've played with Antergos on a live disc a couple of times, and it seems really nice. I just don't have time to fully test different distros. Thanks for a great show, guys. Stan. So, Stan, we'll add that to Chris's list. Actually, I had a listener offer to do reviews for us and record them and send them in. So, Stan, if you want to do a review, that would be cool. You could just record your audio comments, or we bring you on the show. But if you're got stage fright or whatever, I think it would be cool to sort of a man on the street reporter sort of thing, where we take listener contributions for distro reviews. So, Stan, what do you think? So, Seth,
Cool.
did you find it yet?
Yes, it is. One of the world's leading authorities on global security, Mark Goodman, takes readers deep into the digital underground to expose the alarming ways criminals, corporations, and even countries are using new and emerging technologies against you, and how this makes everyone more vulnerable than ever imagined.
Is that Analog X? Is that Mark Goodman? I think it is.
Huh. I don't know.
Yeah,
So-
he's known. If it's the guy I'm thinking of, he's known in the internet community as Analog X. I used to use some of his software back a long time ago. Can't remember what, but yeah, I seem to remember Steve Gibson talking about this book on one of their shows. Then again, maybe I
okay.
dreamed the whole thing in a fevered haze.
Yeah, but so it sounds more like a nonfiction type of book. So
Cool. I'll be sure to check it. I'm always looking for recommendations. Right now, my recommendation list is pretty long, but hey, I've got many years of Audible listening ahead of me. Moving on, Dave has just a whole lot to say. So he starts out saying, "Hello and thank you for your podcast. It's near the top of my rotation that I listen to while driving or doing mindless chores. On the most recent show, probably the trivia one, generated not one, but 3 items I feel compelled to respond to. First one, you mentioned that you listen to a podcast called Revolutions or something to that effect. Well, that was a listener who recommended the podcast Revolutions. I have added it to my feed, but haven't listened to any of it yet. In that same vein, I highly recommend, in the same degree as your recommendation of Daredevil, the podcast called Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. If you're even mildly like history, his podcasts are well worth a listen. I especially appreciated his humorous telling of Julius Caesar's interaction with the pirates that kidnapped him. He recently finished a 5-part series on the First World War. I never knew that World War I Germany is in large part responsible for the existence of the USSR. They injected Lenin into the revolution in order to destabilize that front. I listen to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. It's one of my favorites. I also listen to his Common Sense podcast. But yeah, if you're a history guy, Hardcore History is really, it's not a podcast. It's a book. It's an audio book that he puts out 6 or 7 times a year. He doesn't make it every month, but he did a 5-part series on the rise and fall of the Roman Empire that was amazing. And each podcast is usually like 3 to 4 hours long. That's why I call them audiobooks. He did The Wrath of the Khans, about the rise and fall of the Mongol Empire. Amazing. He really does his research. His storytelling has a narrative arc. It's history at its best. It really is. So if you're at all into history, Dan Carlin's Hardcore History is a must. And I'm sure I've mentioned it, but maybe I haven't.
no, you've mentioned it several times.
Okay, good. I feel better. Dave, go back and listen to more shows. Moving on with his email, it says, second, you mentioned that WD-40 was made of fish oil. That rang a bell with me as one of my old-timer patients, I'm a chiropractor, told me he and others have had relief of arthritic pain by applying WD-40 on their painful joints. I thought that was weird at the time, but now it makes sense. I think some fish oils have anti-inflammatory properties. I still think I won't be prescribing it, but maybe some further research. And finally, you stated emphatically that vaccines don't cause autism, and I stand by it. I've been following the alleged connection between vaccinations and autism for a while now, and interestingly, Tylenol is starting to look like a possible bad guy in autism as well as other childhood diseases. By depleting the liver antioxidant glutathione, which then allows mercury and aluminum in vaccines to do their damage. The third link included below. He's got several links. The author explains how Cuba has a very low autism rate compared to the U.S. per capita, and they also happen to not allow Tylenol as an over-the-counter drug. There are also drops in the rates of new autism cases at the same time as the discovery of Reye's syndrome that made parents stop giving aspirin to children, and the 2 Tylenol murder scares in the 1980s. So anecdotal evidence, but certainly interesting, worth checking out. So thank you, Dave, for your email. I stand by that statement that vaccines don't cause autism, but I'm not willing to gloss over the fact that there are some strong correlations. When this happens. But it's important. You as a man of science must know that correlation does not imply causation, and any scientist who tries to do the two is not a scientist.
Well, I would say that correlation doesn't equal causation. It could imply it. It would, at the very least, provide you another avenue to research.
Okay, so yeah, I used the wrong word, and you're right. The internet was firing up their keyboards at that very moment.
Trying to save you, Mark. I know.
Correlation is also often a precursor to finding causation. Yes, but correlation in itself is not proof of causation.
I totally agree with that.
I once did a research paper in which I proved conclusively using verifiable facts that people who wear Nikes are hardcore drug users, and I had the numbers to back it up. That's it. I'm not going to say anything more about that. I'm just going to leave it as that. As my ninth grade English teacher used to say, "Figures don't lie, but liars figure." Okay, so that's it. That's the end of our listener feedback section. And if I remember, no promises, but if I remember, Dave, I will put your links in the show notes when I'm putting the show up, because if people are interested in following that, and now I haven't read the articles, but I certainly will. And by the way, let's not lose sight of the fact that Tylenol and aspirin and these things were once prescription drugs. They were regulated by various government agencies with 3 letters. And over time, they found that the use of them was safe, and therefore they decided to deregulate it. So,
plus the patents ran out and they couldn't make any more money off of it.
Well, there's that too. Yeah.
I mean, if we were going to be totally honest.
So, well, there are generic prescriptions now, Vicodin, hydrocodone, for example. There's generics all over the place because the patents have run out, but it's still a scheduled drug because it has, has potential. Now, I'm not saying that anyway. I'm going to stop digging because the hole is getting deep. And Seth has a link.
I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, it's one of those things where the overblown knee-jerk overreaction, everything, it's like, hey, there is a possibility that limited amounts of this can be beneficial. So the next thing you know, all of the so-called experts say you need to consume mass quantities of this stuff, and mass quantities of anything is probably bad for you. Mass quantities of water can kill you, but none of it can kill you as well. So, there's the whole moderation aspect that gets lost in today's American society.
Yeah, okay. You forced me to go down that rabbit hole. Recently, at least on my Facebook feed, a series of bad science articles about e-cigarettes was going around saying that they have 10 times more carcinogens than regular cigarettes. And all of those articles, and their various websites have written articles, but essentially all pointing at one study. And you read the study, the science is terrible. And it's like in the 70s that when they studied aspartame saccharin and they found that it caused cancer in rats, they fed the rats the human equivalent of like 1.5 pounds. If you were human size, that's how much you'd have to eat a day, every day for a year. And 30 to 40% of their rats developed cancer. So that's still a pretty low number. You had a 70% chance of not doing it. And secondly, who eats 1 pound of saccharin? But because of that, saccharin causes cancer, and it was, pretty much blown off the market by the scare. And all the way now, when you hear these things that, aspartame, when it heats up, turns into formaldehyde. And therefore, if you eat a Diet Coke that's ever been over 10 degrees Fahrenheit, you will die and be embalmed in the same. These all point back to that same bad science with anecdotes added on top of it. And just stop, people. Just stop. That's all I have to say about it. The same with the autism, right? So one guy does a study, and like 15 other guys do different studies that don't find the same thing. But if you already want to believe it, you say, yeah, but all those guys are on the pockets of the big pharma companies. This one guy, he's the only real one we can trust. That's not how science works. Sorry, I didn't mean to rant. I really didn't. You forced me to.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I will withhold my add-on rant as well, because I love beating the dead horse. It's fun. And golly, I can't wait for Everyday Science to debut on the Element OP network. That one has a lot of potential to generate wads of flame mail.
Instead of calling it Everyday Science, we should call it Everyday BS, because we're about debunking the BS. And also we get to spout some, so it'd be perfect. And BS being bad science. Ha! You see? Okay. And now Seth says that there are some valid video editors on Linux. I've often ranted about that's being the weakness. Maybe he's going to try to prove me wrong.
Well, I came across this news article that there's a new version of Shortcut out. And Shortcut is a video editor in Linux that seems to be rather feature rich and updated on a regular basis. So it's not one of those kind of shareware things, or it's not something that came out 10 years ago and through these 17 sequential hacks it will run on a modern Linux distro. But it seemed to be a live and vibrant video editor.
What's
Again,
interesting is they didn't provide a link to download it. I mean, yeah, they did provide a changelog link, I guess.
Well, but that's the way Softpedia rarely does that.
Yeah.
So, they don't provide a lot of things like that. They are more of a website that would require you to put forth some effort and not just, do things like that. So, but yeah, that's kind of more Softpedia's modus operandi.
All right, so that'd be something worth checking out. I've never heard of Shortcut, but it says
I hadn't either.
Says it's a cross-platform video editing system. It looks movie maker-ish. It doesn't seem to be super advanced just from the one screenshot. I mean, I haven't done any research at all on it, but yeah, I mean, I'm all for checking it out because the ones that are available now aren't great, and there's always the promise of something to come. Light Source, something like that. There's something called, I forget what it is. They've been promising one for like 10 years now, and it's just there's always one to come, and there isn't one yet. So maybe this is a thing.
Right. And, and you said this one is cross-platform, but it was developed for Linux, and the Mac and Windows version don't have near the feature set. So it's not a place where Linux is playing catch up. It's just where they're doing that and providing some of the others.
All right, cool. Wow, that was a really gross sneeze. I'm going to make a marker to get that out of there. Wow.
Sorry.
Right. You even tried to get away from the mic, but no, that one had texture and resonance. It was good.
Man, it was just, I felt it.
Okay.
I felt it coming on, and I was like, do I cover my nose or do I go for the kill? And I thought it would be better to, kind of block whatever potential.
Okay.
But just anyway,
moving on. So how healthy is your ISP in terms of net neutrality? Seth has a way for you to find out.
Yes, I came across this website this article on bgr.com, and you can go over to battleforthenet.com, where they are very much in the net neutrality debate, and they have a test. It is basically a speed test, so as such, any ISP could whitelist this one to kind of fudge the numbers. But you go here and you click on this link, and then you can click on start the test, and then it will tell you is your ISP throttling, providing a so-called internet fast lane, or throttling non-paying traffic in order to allow whatever companies they've entered into agreements with or their own services better access to you. Because it's one thing if you can't watch Netflix and your ISP has a video streaming service that comes in super fast, well, then why are you going to pay for Netflix when you can watch theirs? So it's a way to kind of help monitor and make sure ISPs are being legitimate. But again, we talked about speed tests and how ISPs will whitelist those sites, so that way your speed test looks good, but your reality is not good.
Right.
But this one seems pretty new, so hopefully it's not whitelisted yet. So you can go battleforthenet.com/internet health test and see how healthy your ISP is.
And the idea behind this is that it's going to be crowdsourced. So the more people who use it on a certain ISP, the more data they have about that ISP, and they can compare different times a day and whatever else. So it sounds interesting, but also I think in the end futile. Like, for example, I had to do a speed test with Comcast once to test an issue, and Comcast has their own internal speed test that tests the speed from your modem to their modem. And that's what they call the test. It doesn't actually matter what happens out on the real web. So when they tell you that you're going to get up to 100 megabits or whatever, they're saying from their endpoint to your endpoint, they guarantee that connection, or not even guarantee, but they're fudging that connection. But as we all know, the real connection matters at the other end of where you're going when you're crossing across multiple lanes. And that's why things like speedtest.net were created. It was not to show you how good your link of the connection is, but how good the total connection between you and another endpoint is. And that's where throttling, that's where degraded networks comes into play, and it can really point out some problems. But your ISP is always going to say, no, from my endpoint to your endpoint, that's golden. Which,
there's nothing between their endpoints.
Exactly.
That's the thing. And I just, I can advertise right now a walking knowledge retention up to 78, gigabytes of, whatever. And it says up to, so as long as I have 1K, I'm good, because I didn't promise you that. I promised you up to that. Anyway, it's, we've hammered this home before, and we've talked about how easy it is to manipulate the data and how hard it is to honestly verify the data. But hopefully this is another tool that can be used to kind of at least make them pretend like they're being honest and open.
Yeah. This next one, speaking of honesty and openness, is scary. According to Edward Snowden, the NSA wants to hack the Google Play Store.
Yes. One, I just find it odd that, it's been over a year and we're still hearing about fresh stuff that came out of those. He had a lot of information, but he produced a slide that showed how the NSA had plans to hijack, perform a man-in-the-middle attack to both Google and Samsung app stores. So you think, we've talked before about going to the legitimate app stores and not side-loading apps. So, and again, there's no evidence that this was ever actually done. So it was just plans that they had to say you're somebody that they want to monitor, whether a foreign national, a drug dealer, or terrorist watch list or whatever. So you are connecting to the Google Play Store to get your latest Netflix app or whatever, but they hijack your request, and so they send you a modified Netflix app that injects just a little bit of code where they can see where your phone is and any cell tower you connect to on a regular basis. And there's been lots of conjecture around the internet, no conclusive proof, but a lot of circumstantial proof that the NSA has a way to breach the security of the stores, and that would allow them to pull off some type of man-in-the-middle attack. So this is just showing that, and again, it's no big wow, a spy agency is trying to spy on people. Major news, spoiler alert for life.
And this is a classic, as you called it, man-in-the-middle attack, but it's a targeted man-in-the-middle or spear phishing, because you'd have to know the unique identifier of the perp's phone and be able to pull off the man-in-the-middle between that particular device. That because we're all so disparate, it would be, I'm not going to say impossible. It would be very difficult for them to hack every entrance to the Google Play Store. But since we all carry devices that are uniquely identified by the nature of the system, they have to be. Every phone has an IMEI number or some variant of it that says, this is my unique global address. This is me and only me. So if you know who that is, and you have this technology to do a silent man in the middle, it makes sense. If I were the NSA, I would want to do that, right? And if I'm chasing down a terrorist, I would try to do that. And when he goes to get Angry Bird, because terrorists like Angry Bird too, I would feed him the Angry Bird app plus something that's going to track all his cell phones, his text messages, and phone calls. That's what we pay the NSA to do. So none of this bothers me, except that, as Snowden has pointed out time and time again, they're doing it against their own U.S. citizens, and that is the problem. They're just not allowed to.
Yeah, and this is because this isn't something they would want to do to everyone, because there's too many savvy people out there who look at who, one, have the capability to know what to look for and then know how to capture that and then know how to analyze the data. So if you were expected to go to samsung.com/play store and you ended up at, bit.ly/A7419, you're going, wait a minute, that's not, wait, what happened to my phone? Go drop that in some Clorox and buy a new one or something. So, but for a target, because the kind of people you are going to go after typically don't have that level of internet working sophistication. Their skill set is in a different
Yeah.
avenue of intelligence. So,
You want I should break his thumbs, boss? Those are the guys you're going after.
right.
So moving on from another company doing things that people will think is evil, Firefox wants to sell you some ads directly.
Right. We've talked about before how if, an option you have when you open up a new tab is to have suggested tiles turned on, and, and they sell ad space there.
And that's the default
company.
option, by the way. You have to turn
Right.
it off.
Right. But, again, it's very easy to go in and turn it off, and part of these suggested tiles are ones you go to on a regular basis. So it's like, if you normally every day you go to Dilbert.com to see the latest strip, and you do that consistently, that's probably going to be on the first page of your suggested tiles. But you might also see other things as well. And so what they are doing now is Firefox is scanning your browser history to suggest advertiser sites. And again, of course, I can hear I can't even remember his name.
Stallman,
yeah, talking about privacy and all that kind of stuff. But I personally like the way they're doing it. Firefox is the one scanning, and they are anonymizing and aggregating the data and packaging it to people. And so, for example, suppose you go to a cooking cooking whatever, whether it be a Facebook page or a blog or a podcast, and then you go to a couple of different recipe sites and these other things, then your suggested tab might be Food Network. So they look at and the bar they set is if you have at least 5 of the same thing, then they would put a similar suggested tab in there. And again, if they don't have any money, there won't be a new version of Firefox. Right. So if people aren't going to give to the Mozilla Foundation, then they have to do something to monetize. And since they've switched to Yahoo over Google, they're cutting down on how much money they're getting from Google, and Google has become more of a enemy than a frenemy because Google has Chrome, and Google wants to dominate all aspects of your world and not just search. So they've got to do other things to get money. So I don't have a problem with the way they're doing it. I don't really like the suggested tabs just because I like the blank page. And so I turned it off. But, even whenever I had it on, it didn't really bother me because I only ever opened the tab when I was going to the address bar to type something. And I can't ever really say I was like, oh, what's this? I want to go there. But, that's just how I roll. But if they can make some money off of it, good for them. I like the way they're doing it. They're kind of at least, of course, maybe they're saying one thing and doing another. That's always a possibility. But the way they say they're doing it, they do a good enough job for a tinfoil advisor guy such as myself to not have any privacy concerns of the way they're getting that data and the way they're controlling the data and not just giving it to everyone.
Right. So this doesn't bother me at all. So if I'm understanding the way this works, you're not necessarily trusting them with your history in that you're asking them to go, you type into the browser where you want to go. So history is a part of the function. If you ever want to click the back button, that has to restore history. So it's just a part of the way the system goes. So that doesn't bother me. The trust is inherent in that. And if I'm understanding this article correctly, they have an anonymous, a bank of sites of advertisers who have paid them to have things delivered to them, and the anonymized data that says this user might benefit from this site, and the site doesn't get any information about you until you go to the site, which is again fine. So it's just preloading a list of things that you think that it thinks you might like. Why would I not want that? As long as it's accurate, and it has to be accurate, right? It's looking at my own browsing history, and the question will be how adaptive is it? And I've complained before that sometimes I have to go into private mode to do searches because I don't want Google Now showing me, everything I search, because it might have been just a one-off thing, just something that I did and I don't want to do again. Or I'm looking for, a gift for my wife and I don't want that to pop up somewhere. So and again, I may have to do the same thing with Firefox. Just fire up a private browser where the history isn't saved when I don't want things that are going to pollute it. Like when I'm looking up, some kid show for my kids, I don't want that to be in my feed, but it was information I needed at the time. So yeah, this doesn't bother me. I think it's a fine idea, but I honestly don't think it's going to be very effective.
Yeah, but it's a way for them to get a little money off of really not doing much on their part.
Right.
Mozilla will have the final approval over all sites that are entered into the Suggested Tiles program, and will require visits to at least 5 similar sites before offering up a related suggestion through the feature. So, as long as you keep your browser history clear where you have no more than 4 porn searches in there at any one time, you're good.
Yeah. So we just got a 1, 2, 3, 4 purge. 1, 2, 3,
Right.
4. Yeah.
Right.
And sticking with the same vein, but taking it literally offline, a Virginia man doesn't want people to know what his license plate is.
Well, it's not that they don't want to know. He doesn't want to know because obviously they know. He doesn't want them tracking where his license plate has been. And he filed suit, and actually, I don't remember. I have to reread the thing. I don't remember if he won or similar cases have won, because the Virginia, they keep and they store where his license plate has been, and they don't purge that data after so long. And so, he did a kind of freedom of information request and got back from them a list of many places where his car was at. And he's like, he wasn't,
112 times of them. Wow.
Yeah. And so he's just like, I don't really care for anybody to know where I've been. Please delete this. And so this is not something I ever considered. It's so easy for most people who go. I avoid tollways just because I am against the concept of a toll road. That's what the gas tax is for. If you're going to go toll roads, repeal the gas tax. Anyway, that's my little mini rant on that. But I don't like double paying for the roads I drive on. But there's the license plate readers on that. And it's just so easy to capture that information and then store it in a database and of course, we all know how awesome state level security is. That information would never be compromised or never be inadvertently open to the public or left, hacked or anything like that. So this guy is obviously just blowing in the wind over something that would never happen.
Yeah. Well, the complaint says that he found a couple of pictures of him and his daughters in his driveway. So what's interesting here is when you're out in public, your actions are by definition public. Right. That's why nobody has to ask permission to take pictures of a public highway. You're on a public highway. You're in the public, and it's kind of an interesting scenario here. You have a uniquely identifiable tag because you're required by law to have it, and you're in public. So essentially, you're required to be tracked in public. But then there's the definition of public. If I'm standing in my driveway with my child, is that public or is that private? That's a good question. Some would say that's public because you're outside. Others would say you're on your own property. That by definition is private. So, that it's an interesting case. But I think it's spitting into the wind. We are going to be tracked more and more often because we can be. As the technology makes it available, people will use it. And the idea is to just have really, really vigilant oversight. That's the only way you're ever going to make sure that keep good people honest.
Right.
And that's what it is.
Yeah. One good thing about where I live, if somebody's taking a picture of my license plate, I know it's not part of a normal program because I'm off the road in the country. You can't see my license plate from the road. You have to go through some method of, either out in the woods with the lens or some type of drone flyover or something. So, I don't live in the suburbs, but I mean, this is from a privacy standpoint, this is kind of scary. They can look and see that, oh, look, every Friday, the daughter gets out of the car by herself at this
Right.
time. You don't want that, So anyway, it was just, I was like, this had never crossed my mind as a possibility. And it was a little, tinfoil advisory, kind of made me want to, maybe roll something over the top of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you that it's there is reason to pause and reflect as a result of this story. But unfortunately, I'm very fatalistic about this. And I think things will not get better. They will only get worse. And it's not, you can't fight the technology. You have to fight the system, and you have to make sure that there's oversight and there's rules in place.
And they weren't following their policy of purging the information
Exactly.
after 24 hours. Had it been purged after 24 hours, you wouldn't be able to see a pattern, or you would have to actively, figure some way to exploit the security of that to see a pattern. Versus, hey, I wonder what Bob Jones is up to. Oh, look, here's a record of every time he's left his house for the last 10 years. Seems to me he goes somewhere every Thursday at 6:15. And then I wonder where he goes. Well, let's see where else he shows up Thursday at 6. He shows up at Dairy Queen. I don't know, but it's just kind of weird.
And then certainly in Europe, where traffic cameras are everywhere, not just traffic cameras, but police cameras on streets are everywhere. This sort of thing is going to continue to happen, and in the U.S. it's getting more prevalent. My question is, why is there a traffic camera that can see his driveway? That seems very unusual to me.
Yep.
No transition into this one. Like China, Russia wants to have their own mobile OS, and they want it to be non-US based.
Right. One of the things from this article, and again, there was a neat, let me look for the, one of the neat kind of directions this article went is longer term, any sort of balkanization is likely to fray the value of global technology markets and services. We may be witnessing the creation of what are effectively national information silos. So, right now, you kind of have Apple and Android are, your two worldwide mobile platforms. Of course, Windows, Woohoo, and a couple of people here and there still have BlackBerry, and then there's a few other minor things. But those are your two big deals. But of course, China has tried real hard to make one that's Chinese specific and away from those, and where that way, they're keeping that information there and it's not coming over here. Russia is here trying to do the same thing. They're looking to use the Selfish OS. So, MiGo will live. Unfortunately, it will live under Russian
behind
rule.
the Iron Curtain.
Yeah, behind the Iron Curtain. Bye, Migo. That was nice to know you. So, but anyway, their goal is to use Selfish, and they point out that Nokia, it's not only owned by Nokia, but there's a lot of Russian and Chinese shareholders as well. And it was just kind of an interesting article. It talks about we're talking about the globalization of the world, but there are lots of places actively looking to deglobalize the mobile infrastructure of the world. So that way you don't have vanilla Android or Google's version of Android ubiquitously everywhere. You have, a heavily version of Chinese where all of that mobile data stays in China, and then you have a Russian version, and then maybe you have an African version, maybe an EU version, and then just the Google version that we know of would just be kind of the American version. And so I don't know what that would do. As far as maybe one good thing is that there wouldn't be so many freaking apps in the App Store. So maybe the apps that were there would be a little bit better, but by the same token, you have less people developing, so you won't have as much, oh, hey, this app could be better like this. It was just an interesting article. Thought it would be cool to talk about it a little bit.
Well, and what makes it tie directly into this show is that all of these things, by their very nature, are going to be based on Linux, because Linux is the only open thing out there right now, and it would take decades of time and effort to redesign something from the ground up, and that's just not reasonable when Linux is already there. So the Google built the wrapper of Android on Linux, and the guts of it are Java. It's all going to be Linux in the future. And so often as we lament, Linux is not big on the desktop, likely never will be big on the desktop, but it is going to be a thing. And if you want to get in on that thing, our friends over at the Linux Academy can help you do that. linuxacademy.com. Their stated goal is to take you from being a computer proficient individual to a Linux administrator by way of, again, starting with their step-by-step video courses. That's where it all started. And this is not just some YouTube course where a 15-year-old kid walks you through something. These are professional educators who are professionals in the field, who are experts on this knowledge, independently certified experts who have produced these high-quality videos. But it's not just the videos. It's the study guides that go with them. It's the practice tests that go after them. It's the community of people around you that you can tap into. It's the responsiveness of the organization. You ask a question, you make a comment, you have a suggestion. Anthony and his team listen and are agile and ready to respond to that. But again, the thing that I keep stressing, because I just think it's the thing that sets them apart from anybody else, is their really dynamic lab infrastructure. Up to 4 VMs running simultaneously, 8 different distros to choose from, but 4 running simultaneously in their own private network, talking to each other safely and securely on Amazon's cloud infrastructure, so it's lightning fast and robust, and you can't destroy it. I mean, you wipe something out, you build a new one in a matter of a few seconds. You just can't get that. It's the killer tool that the average geek can't get. Sure, you can build a bunch of VMs, but you can't have them that fast, that reliable, that robust, and with minimal overhead. And that's what Linux Academy offers you. And they offer it for a song. $25 a month is the most you can pay. That's their highest price possible, $25 a month. But like anything else, the more you buy, the less you pay. If you buy a quarter, 3 months at a time, it's $65. There's a $10 discount right off the top there. And if you buy annually, it's $215. That breaks down to less than $18 a month. You will not find this level of education at this quality, independently certified quality at that, for $18 a month. You're just not going to do it. And if you go to linuxacademy.com/everydaylinux, you'll get a special price break even off of that. So linuxacademy.com, check them out, and you can be part of this new thing that's all going to be based on Linux. No comment? Great. Moving on. No.
Yeah, I mean, no, I was, you also could be like Brandon and be part of the OP Job Corps.
Exactly. Yes. And give us 15% of your earnings in perpetuity. If the $25 a month for Linux Academy seems a little pricey for you, you're probably not going to be interested in this $9 Kickstarter computer chip.
Actually, no. You might be the person this was built for. Yes, there is a Linux-based mini PC for just $9, and it is called Chip. It is a Kickstarter program, and there are 12 days to go. For $9, you get a board that is not quite as powerful as the Raspberry Pi, but and there's some other things you can do as well. Like the one I'm really thinking about getting, it's called the Pocket Chip. You get kind of the chip and a little keyboard and display kind of thing, and you'll have this tiny little something about the size of a Game Boy computer, and it comes preloaded with Scratch. And so this isn't a build an NSA busting hacker proof utopian vision of the future. This is kind of a cheap way that you can, or an inexpensive way that you can kind of teach somebody the basics of programming, I mean, it's $10.
And it runs LibreOffice, it runs Debian, and you can do LibreOffice, so your kid can do homework on a chip
Right.
that's about half the size of a business card. It's tiny and low powered, and we got something that small. You don't need a big fan or anything like that. It's the specs on it are fairly decent. It's a gigahertz processor. It's got Wi-Fi. It's got 512 megs of RAM. So, I mean, this is a netbook of a few years ago, shrunken down to half the size of a business card.
Yes, they had a goal of $50,000. They have so far over 32,000 backers and over $1.7 million raised. So I'm thinking by the end of the day, they might have 32,127 backers. I might get one of these. Not that I would do a freaking thing with it, but why not just throw money away at cheap, useless crap? So, but yeah, $10 for a single board computer. I mean, dude,
And of course, $10 isn't all of it. You still got to have a display. You got to have a keyboard. You got to have a mouse. So, but assuming you buy a relatively inexpensive display, you're talking a reasonable, a usable chip, a usable computer for $120.
If you have bought a computer in the last 10 years, a regular desktop computer, you already have a display, a mouse, and a keyboard that are most likely VGA and USB. So you basically need a power supply. You probably already have these things lying around. So it's not really outside the realm of possibility that all you need is a power supply.
Which would any cell phone, if you've bought a cell phone, you've got that already.
Right. So, with the junk that you don't know what to do to get rid of, you can have a fully functioning, cute little computer. So anyway, it was just, I just had to pass it along because, 60 millimeters by 40 millimeters, that's pretty dang small.
And now for the bad news. Good thing Chris isn't here to see it. Steam numbers are in, and Linux is on the way down.
Plummeting like a rock off the deep end. Linux has dropped, and I'm vamping because the stupid thing won't load. I don't know what happened.
Now less than 1% of their overall market runs Steam on Linux.
Yes, it was 1.05 in April, and now it's down to 0.94. But again, they really aren't upfront with how they get their hardware service or how they do their hardware survey. But yeah, it seems to not ever. And there's the whole Steam OS, which is Linux. Doesn't seem to be such a big deal. It's not showing up in the numbers. I don't know. People maybe like Steam, but they like it on Windows.
Well, here's the thing. If you're a PC gamer, you need Windows. So many big titles only run on Windows. If you've already got a Windows machine, you can run Steam on Windows and you're good. So there's so little market for the hardcore gamer who's only on Linux. If you're a hardcore gamer, you kind of can't be only on Linux. If you're a mid-grade gamer or a casual gamer, then sure, you're fine there. But again, the thing is, everybody already has a Windows PC. Like it or not, everybody's got one. Or a Mac. And so it's only us 1%ers who have Linux desktops in the first place. So, their numbers are trending right along with desktop OS use. It's not surprising to me and also not disturbing to me. It doesn't bother me. What it will probably mean is the Steam OS people are likely, the Valve, that's the name of the company, is likely to stop developing for Linux and because it works fine on Wine. So their Windows version has worked fine, and so there's kind of no reason for them to put more effort into it. That's what I see happening. But again, for their own Steam boxes that are running on Linux, they probably don't want to do that. So they're either going to be scratching their own itch or they're going to stop doing it.
Right. But, Mark, this is a year of the Linux desktop, and Steam is going to...
2015!
Yes. No, I didn't say 2015. I said this is the year of the Linux desktop. There's a big difference in those.
But one thing in SteamOS's favor now is that you can do Netflix on it. So this living room box now can do a couple of things, and that's powerful.
Yeah, I thought this, to me, this is one of the things that has the potential to cause Linux to maybe break out because let's face it, Netflix is huge in America. A lot of people just that's how they want to consume media is over Netflix. But you know, you don't want to have 17 different boxes hooked up to your TV in the living room. You know, you don't want to look like, you know, you're a hacker in there. So the fact that you can have Steam and Steam is a, you know, this isn't really a super hack to get it on there, but it is kind of a little non-standard way. But you can run Netflix off of Steam OS, and if it gets totally, one of the things is this is still in development, and so there are bugs, and so it's not maybe going to run perfectly. But if this continues to be developed and it gets to be smooth, then you have a viable reason that hey, we can ditch the whatever we have and go with this because we can get Netflix on the same device, on the same machine that we get our games on if you're a Steam user. So, and you don't have to have the Windows version to also be able to go to it. Anyway, it seemed, you know, maybe this is in much the same way that the Allies overcame the German U-boat tactics of World War II. It was a one big silver bullet. It was a bunch of little things incrementally getting better. Maybe this is just one of those little things getting incrementally better that will all of a sudden will go, hey, wait a minute, when did Linux get up to 20-30% of the market share?
If you can do if you can do Steam on Netflix on SteamOS, maybe there's hope for me getting it on my Raspberry Pi. And that's, I have a media center that can't do Netflix right now. I had to go get a Roku because my Raspberry Pi can't do Netflix. So there's hope, and little things like that, like you say, these incremental things, they spread ripples throughout the water, and it may make changes that you don't foresee. So good on you, developer who is unnamed, for making this happen.
Yay.
Because Steam is in Linux now, kind of. It's in Chrome, and only in Chrome, and it's...
You mean Netflix?
Sorry, Netflix. And it's not as good, at least on my machine. On my machine, I can run the Windows partition or in a VM, and Netflix looks better than it does on the Linux side. But that may be the Linux driver. You know, I'm willing to concede that might not be the thing, but still, it's only on one browser. And you know, if we can, anything we can spread to make these killer apps, and Netflix is a killer app. People buy whole devices, i.e., me and my Roku, just for Netflix. So this is a positive thing, and could certainly be a big win for Valve on something that they hadn't even thought about doing.
Yeah, or maybe they had thought about doing it and they just weren't able to. I don't know, or they didn't think to do it this way. So, yay.
Right. Something I said in that last rant sounded kind of like OK Google, and so my watch started transcribing everything I said. First world problems. This is kind of good news to me in a twisted sort of way. It looks like the interesting old Microsoft is back, and they're back to their strong arm tactics now, including blackmail. So Microsoft may be interesting again.
Yes. You know, recently the UK went through this thing where they were they switched to the open document format, kind of leaving the proprietary one they were doing for Microsoft in the dustbin of history, hopefully. Microsoft called a few government officials, they use the term MPs, and they kind of threatened and said, hey, if this passes, we're not saying, but maybe Microsoft won't have as big of economic impact in your area as did before. So they think to close or reduce Microsoft R&D facilities in their constituencies. And there's a lot of people who did this and or who reported this. And so, and of course, Microsoft refused to comment on the report.
MP, I'm pretty sure, is members of parliament. So that's who they were calling and saying, you know, if you should want to be reelected, maybe you should not use this ODF thing. And of course, Microsoft, I never heard of it. I don't know what you're talking about. Surely couldn't be us. Um,
That's not my department. I really can't comment on that. I
let
would
me-
need to refer you to our lawyers who
Yeah.
are on staff and getting paid anyway.
Let
Talk
me
to them.
refer you to the legal department. Interesting. And the next thing, the U.S. Senate maybe finally has had enough, and they're trying to take some of the NSA's power away from them with a new act. It's a good thing.
Yes. Are we getting a? Did somebody stumble over some uncommon sense getting out of the bathroom? But yes, the Senate voted down the USA Freedom Act, which was a way to basically extend the Patriot Act that wasn't very patriotic, and that it gave the government pretty much carte blanche to just do whatever they wanted to in the name of security, totally forgetting, I believe it was Benjamin Franklin who said something along the lines of, and then it just lost it.
If you give up
Those-
freedom for security, you deserve neither.
Right. Yes. I don't know what happened to it. It was gone. But yeah, so in a midnight session, the Senate voted it down. I think this is a good thing, but then again, it is the Senate we're talking about, and they don't have a track record of
Right.
doing anything that is good or beneficial to the regular public and not the special interest public. So we'll see how it happens.
So the Patriot Act was sort of a modified war powers thing that was done immediately after September 11th, 2001, to give the government expanded powers, particularly in the area of surveillance, so that we could get these bad guys who just brought down the Twin Towers in New York City. And everybody was for it because we were all feeling super patriotic, and we decided that we would give the government temporary expanded powers. This is 2015. 14 years later, those temporary expanded powers are still there and still expanding. In many ways, I've been pro-Patriot Act. In many ways, I've been against the Patriot Act. But it's time for it to go. If we want the government to have these powers, we need to do it the right way. We need to have votes, and we need to pass laws, and we need to make the government more powerful the right way. The problem with this is that we snuck it in the door, and we've been giving the government more and more power without a vote and without the people having any say in it. And that's where these stupid Snowden things, not that Snowden was stupid, but these stupid things that he's been pointing out came to pass. It was a government who had been slowly gathering more and more power without anybody knowing about it, without any vote on it, without any referendums. So it's time for the Patriot Act to go, and it's going to expire, and it looks like finally it's going to be over. And if we go back and we realize that we need these things, then we can put it to a real vote. But Snowden came out and said, here's all these things that your government has been doing without you knowing about it. That's the problem I have with it. Not that the NSA spies, not that spies are spying, but that we didn't know that they were doing it, and we didn't give them the power to do it properly. They stole that power. And anytime a federal government of any kind steals power from its people, that's a bad thing.
Yes, because what government goes around and willingly gives back the power? Oh, guys, I took this power over here, and it come to find out I really didn't need it. And there was this money that came with it that I'm really not doing anything. So I'm just going to let y'all have it because I don't need it. Governments do that all the time.
Tax rebates for everyone.
Yes.
There have been several times throughout history when people have willingly given up freedom and elected dictators because they thought it was the right thing to do at a time. Hitler, let's not forget, was elected to his position. Julius Caesar, Nero, the proconsuls of Rome who became emperors were elected by their people. And no government gives up power once it's been given. It has to be taken back, or it has to be lost through attrition or war. And these are the problems when you, in the swell of patriotism after having been attacked, you give your government power. 14 years later, it's still holding on to it.
I would say the swell of fear after we were attacked. I don't really think it was patriotism that gave that.
Often the two are one. Often the two are different sides of the same coin. Patriotism is fear with a positive spin on it.
That would be a good discussion for everyday politics. I don't know that I totally agree with that. Anyway, go ahead.
No, that's. Yeah, I was just going to say that I didn't, again, there's a reason that I'm called the Sultan of the Soapbox. I don't intend to. The soapbox just puts itself under my feet. I don't go step up on it. I'm just minding my own business, and whoop, suddenly I'm on a soapbox. But when we start, talking about governments with too much power, that's something that I'm passionate about. I'm all about, I believe in the concept of a republic, that we elect leaders that we trust to represent on our behalf. We are not a democracy. We're a republic. I believe in that concept because democracies are too unruly and they fall apart. But when the republic, the representatives are doing things and they are not held accountable and they have no, that's the whole problem. When they can go and do anything they want and we don't know about it and we don't have any power to do it, that's no longer a republic. That's now an oligarchy. And I didn't sign up for that.
Don't disagree with that.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. This week in history, something happened that was cool.
Yeah. I had found another one that I was going to use till I saw it plastered all over the news everywhere. And I thought, people already know that one. So May the 24th, 1844, Samuel Morse sends the message, "What hath God wrought?" which is a biblical quotation from Numbers 23:23 from the old Supreme Court chamber in the United States Capitol to his assistant, Alfred Vail, in Baltimore, Maryland, to inaugurate the first telegraph line. To me, that's pretty cool. In a lot of ways, all we have today is a super fast telegraph line instead of and forth and assembled by computers rather than a guy with this little garter band around his arm and a visor, writing as he hears. But, the telegraph, was binary and precursor
in digital. It was
right?
analog binary, right? Today.
Yeah.
So DC to Baltimore, I just Googled, is about 40 miles. So depending on where those two things are suited, it's anywhere from 40 to 50 miles. And instant communication over 50 miles was, to say groundbreaking is an understatement of the term. 50 miles was a hard day's ride, a two light days ride. So you just took 2 days out of the information loop. That's amazing. It's hard to even come up with something that in the modern day can compare to that.
Imagine, you could not have, this is the reason why America is a republic. You could not have a democratic operation in a 100-mile radius because it would take you 2 to 3 to 4 days to get to the 100 miles and then 2 to 3 to 4 days to get back. So you're looking at bare minimum a week. You say, hey, should I vote yes or no on this bill? And then you're like waiting for a week to find the answer to that. So that's why we had representation, because we could say, I trust you to do what's best for us. This group of people did. So he was there. And then, the news could filter out, and come election time, we don't think you did a good job. We're going to send somebody else. But now you can have, again, instantaneous in comparison to what it was. Yes. But you're looking at, maybe a minute for the thing to go there, and then maybe a minute or two for them to put it down and read it. And then, within an hour, you can have a legitimate conversation near enough to real time to be, very useful.
Sorry, I had a technical glitch there. I was hoping you'd just keep talking and I'd go through it, but
sorry. I finished what I was talking about.
It's not a problem. So that's a cool this week in history, as far as I'm concerned, because that's where it all began. That was the beginning of the internet, the beginning of communication, the beginning of digital communication, right?
Yeah.
Samuel Morse had to invent Morse code. He for the first time digitized, binaryized communication, because he needed a way to do it over this system. So, that's the foundation of the fact that you and I are having a conversation over Skype. That's just cool. 1844. So how far we've come in less than 200 years.
Yeah, I wonder how much it would be cool to see what the original prices were. It was so much per word to send,
Right.
even if it was only a penny a word. Imagine the text of a short speech such as the Gettysburg Address. How long would it take to do that out, and then how much would it cost? So
Right.
you're looking at, and back then a penny was a lot of money. Now a penny is something you find in the parking lot, and who cares?
Right.
But
And
back
I can
then,
now download a 20-hour audiobook for free. I mean, it's too cheap to bill, right? I get unlimited quote unquote data. So, even if say I'm doing it over my cell phone data where I get a gig at X amount, even then the amount is so insignificant that I don't have a problem doing it. Downloading 10 hours worth of spoken words. That's, it's kind of amazing where we are.
yeah.
Okay. Now Seth, what is your funny, your humorous, your off the wall link for us this week?
Okay. I had a hard time coming up with something, so I thought I would share with you Richard Stallman's personal site, how he does computing. He just talks about the type of computer he uses, why he uses it, what version of different software he uses. And anyway, stallman.org/stallman-computing.html. You can read it and see that, the cool thing is he is very passionate about his core values, and he seems to maintain his core values all the way down the line. He's not one of those
He is
people who
consistent.
say, who is only, but he's consistent, it seems, at every level. And that's one of the things that makes him such an oddball in society. He doesn't seem to tolerate those internal inconsistencies that much of the rest of the culture at large takes for granted. So anyway, you can just kind of read over and see what he does if you're interested. And Richard Stallman's personal computing world.
Yeah. I know that on this show there's a sort of a recurring theme of bashing Stallman. I actually respect the man to no end. He has integrity beyond what most people do. He's true to his own beliefs. I think that some of his beliefs are a little whack job, but he's entirely sold out to those beliefs, and I have to respect that. I mean, he goes so far as to he won't even use a proprietary BIOS on his laptop. So he had to find the one laptop on the market that had a free initializer that wasn't encumbered in any way or closed in any way. The thing is, it doesn't necessarily have to be proprietary. It's just if it's not open, if he can't see it, he won't use it. It talks about here how he used a one laptop per child device, and it had a binary blob for Wi-Fi. So instead of using that, he just bought his own external Wi-Fi thing. So the man makes his decisions carefully, and he measures them against his own beliefs, and I respect that. I sometimes think he does more harm than good, but history will tell us that. It's not my course. It's not my job to make that decision right now.
Right. But same token, there needs to be somebody out there,
right,
who is, you need the guy who is off the deep end on the right, and you need the guy who is off the deep end on the left, whether you're talking issues of, morality or politics or technology or freedom or whatever. You need to see the complete picture of where that direction points to. Most of the time you can say there are several points about that position that are good, but there are also several points about that position that are good. But if you don't have the complete picture of what one side looks like, then you can't have a good discussion about what the end product will be. So
good stuff.
yeah. Anyway.
So this is the part of the show where I tell us how you can contact us. Go to elementop.com, click the contact us button at the top of the page. That will send a nicely formatted email that gets priority in my inbox. If you'd like to send an email individually, aside from that, you can go to edl@elementop.com. That goes to all three of us, or Chris at elementop.com, Seth at elementop.com for your Stump the Sultan questions for that show that hopefully is coming. Seth, have you had any response about that at all?
I think there was one that came in. I've gone through and looked at some of them, but there hasn't been a lot yet.
Okay.
But it's only been out for a few days. So
yeah, and I also want to remind you about the Element Opie app. Currently not available in the App Store, only at our website. If you go to elementopie.com, there's a link to it. There's a whole forum section to it. You can get it there. We still need more people to hammer on it. Kaiser has sort of gone radio silent for a while. I'm assuming he's busy doing the thing that actually makes money off of, but I'm sure the app will continue to be in development, and we need more people pounding on it. So go do that. Also, if you want to leave a voice message, 559-IM-OPIE is our phone number, or you can use the widget at the top of the page. Google Voice will call you if you don't even want to dial the phone, or if you're outside the U.S. or don't want to pay that toll, you can call, just send me a file, an audio file, keep it under 3 minutes, and we'll do it that way. We love hearing from you. We love doing this show for you. Again, as I've said so many times, we wouldn't do this show without you, because then that would just be a little crazy. But we appreciate you being a listener. And we hope to have Seth and Chris back next week for an amazing show about stuff. So we look forward to that. Seth, as always, thanks for being the great host that you are. Listener, thanks for being the great listener that you are. And I'm going to say that ends this episode of Everyday Linux.
bye.
Whew. I felt like I was just talking a mile a minute there at the end. All right. YouTube viewers, see you later.